For many steelworkers in Scunthorpe, uncertainty is all they have known. And so uncharted territory when the government announced this afternoon that they will take control of the plant.
The future of British steel hangs in the balance. There is no time to waste. So we are recalling Parliament tomorrow for a Saturday sitting. We will pass emergency legislation in one day to give the Business Secretary the powers to do everything possible to stop the closure of these blast furnaces.
Have you heard the news?
I've seen the news, yeah.
Parliament's to be recalled tomorrow.
It triggered enormous relief among the workforce. Tony Gosling works on the key blast furnaces, following in the footsteps of his father, grandfather and great-grandfather. Recalling Parliament is a big deal. How's this gone down?
Well, I'm absolutely elated, and I know most of the workforce will be, because we've been waiting for this. I understand that the talks between the government and the company haven't been wholly successful. It looks like the government's prepared to step in, which is absolutely what the workforce want and absolutely what the town wants and the local community wants.
It has been a hugely anxious time for those working inside the Scunthorpe plant, triggered at the end of March when Chinese owners Jingye announced it was consulting on closure after claiming they were losing £700,000 a day. That same day, they'd reportedly asked the government for £1 billion to keep it open. The government offered half. After that was rejected, talks began on Wednesday between the two parties, with no definitive resolution. The immediate priority is to get the coke coal to its destination of Immingham Docks, currently sat anchored at sea and unpaid for. Without it, the furnaces can't run and high-grade pure steel can't be produced. And so taking control in the short term buys the government more time to explore saving the entire plant more permanently. And one way to do that is through nationalisation. Is this a step closer to government ownership?
We hope so. This morning we weren't sure that nationalisation would come. We were running out of time. If they needed to do it, they needed to do it now. Now I don't want to count my chickens, but yeah, we're hoping tomorrow that that's what's going to happen. They're going to push the button on nationalisation.
Many here had feared the worst. They thought they were weeks away from closure. And while they are all too aware that nothing is guaranteed, for now, at the very least, they have hope.
So, Rachel, what's been the reaction to the news?
Well, Charlene, hope and relief are not emotions that people here are used to, but throughout the afternoon, car horns have been beeping as people drive past this plant. As we have heard so many times before, this does not just affect steel workers. One employee told us this afternoon that Scunthorpe only exists because of the bed of iron that it sits on. But we must remember, we are not there yet. Nationalisation has not yet been announced, and if it is tomorrow, then it won't be immediate. There is a whole process that has to take place in order for it to happen, and we'll hear more about that from Harry in a moment. But if the government does take over more permanently, then they'll have to come up with a really serious plan on how to make production here greener and more sustainable. Now, it is correct to say that this was not what the unions were expecting today, but given what Sir Keir Starmer said about global instability, perhaps it isn't much of a surprise that he has decided to make this move, which will ensure that steel production is kept here in the UK.
OK, Rachel, thanks very much for that. Well, the Prime Minister was very clear in saying that all options remain on the table. So this could very well lead to nationalisation, as Rachel just said. Nevertheless, any operation to save British steel would have to bail out some pretty eye-watering losses, and the sums of money involved will inevitably have repercussions for the taxpayer. Well, Rachel mentioned him earlier, our political correspondent Harry Horton, and here he is in the studio with us. So what is the government doing exactly?
Well, it is taking the fairly extraordinary step of recalling all MPs and Lords back to Parliament this Saturday. Many of them are on their Easter break at the moment, to try and pass emergency legislation in one day that will give the government the power to essentially control British steel. It will give them the power to force the company to buy these raw materials, bring them in to keep the blast furnaces running, and to direct the workforce to keep those furnaces open. Now, government sources have said they've become increasingly frustrated in their negotiations with the Chinese owners of British Steel. They say they keep rejecting what they call significant financial offers to keep it running. And they say it became clear in the last 24 hours that the owners weren't going to bring in these raw materials to keep the site operating, and ministers feel like they have to act now to keep those blast furnaces operating, and if not, it would be too late to save this site.
But why is this so important to the government?
Well, this is the only virgin steel site in the UK. It means it's the only place we can manufacture our own steel, and that's really important for infrastructure projects in the UK, for defence projects, both areas where the government is spending more money. Now, the government haven't outlined exactly how much money that they're putting in. They say that £700,000 loss per week figure that Rachel mentioned in her report, they believe that's accurate. So you get a sense of the scale of money that the government's putting in here. This isn't nationalisation, but this keeps the Scunthorpe site open and means that nationalisation could be an option in future. And frankly, that is the most likely outcome at this stage in the next few weeks.
OK, Harry, thanks very much. Well, Donald Trump's tariffs haven't directly affected the woes of British Steel, even though its current owner is one of China's biggest companies, as Harry mentioned. Nevertheless, these dramatic developments are taking place against a backdrop of global economic turmoil, with China today ramping up tariffs on US goods to 125%. Dan Rivers is in Washington for us. And Dan, is there any sign of the global trade war de-escalating anytime soon?
Not at the moment, no. I mean, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, has been speaking just in the last few minutes, saying that they are hopeful for a deal with China, but nothing concrete about any kind of direct contact between President Trump and President Xi. For example, she's saying that they will use the money from the tariffs that are in place against China and lower ones against the rest of the world to pay down some of the debt. But this is an issue that's really coming to the fore at the moment, is the amount of interest that the US government is having to pay to service that debt, which has gone up and up throughout this crisis as markets lose confidence in the US economy. Effectively, the yield on US bonds has crept up, and that is a pretty unsustainable situation if it carries on for very long. We've seen today China responding in kind with increasing, as you say, their tariffs against the US up to now from 84% up to 125%. The US tariffs on China are 145%. This is an unsustainable situation in terms of global trade, particularly for the US economy. So now everyone is waiting to see if there's any kind of backing down from President Trump.